Acknowledging Exalts Me, Part 1. What's today's topic? Acknowledging Exalts Me. We've been reading in Matthew 23, 1 through 23. And we're talking about when Jesus was with the Pharisees and the scribes. The Pharisees were always going after and confronting Jesus, questioning him. All the wise and the doctors were trying to understand. But one of the interesting things about the kingdom is that the kingdom has its own principles and methods. In order for you to handle the kingdom of God, you have to learn to handle the life manual. Can someone show me a life manual? That is the life manual. People call it the Bible. But its real name is the life manual. Why is it a life manual? Because it's the manual of my life. Or do you have another method that teaches you to live life? So there are people that don't say anything because they're doing and they love to do whatever they want to do. And since they're going to do what they want to do, they don't care whether that's the manual or not. Keep on doing what you want. Don't worry. That manual teaches us to learn to acknowledge. The problem all human beings have is that they don't acknowledge. The greatest dilemma, the great problematic, the wars, the sicknesses, every financial problem, every difficulty, everything that has been produced through evil on earth is the product of someone not wanting to acknowledge. The greatest wars, confrontations, differences, sicknesses, everything, the disgraces of humans have to do with someone not wanting to acknowledge. Your greatest disgrace and problem, the reason why you're behind, your greatest problems, the reason why you're stuck, left behind, you have had your whole life issues, battles, consequences as a product of not wanting to acknowledge. Acknowledge, to acknowledge. Let's define. The definition of acknowledging is to remember or identify something or someone. Is to admit. Sensory perception. It means to have sensors, discernment. That is to acknowledge. Mental sensation, to accept, and it's also principle of authority. All that is to acknowledge. So a person that acknowledges is one who's remembering, is one who's identifying, is one who is admitting, is one who has a sensory perception, who discerns things, is a person that knows how to handle common sense. There are people that don't want to use common sense. Today I was talking to someone, my oldest son, Eric. My oldest son is someone who's totally radical. You tell him, move that piece of trash, and he's going to go move that one piece of trash, even though there's one next to it. And you say, okay, why didn't you move that one? And he'll say, well, you told me that one. He's like that. Those that don't understand my child are going to have issues. Because you tell my son, okay, fix that chair, and he will fix that chair. What about the other ones? Well, you said that one. In other words, he doesn't like to use common sense. And I'm like, okay, my son, use common sense, use it. Today I told him, can you please put my laptop in my bag so that I can go to the truck? He put it in the bag. And I tell him, okay, but you left out the cable, the charging cable. Well, you told me to put the laptop in. But my son, the cable, electricity, the laptop without the cable, it's not good for anything. Yeah, but you said the laptop. Common sense is from God. And there are people that don't use common sense. Listen, it sounds funny, but it could be that many people are not exercising that aspect. You said to do everything good for God. There are people that want to behave so well towards God, And when you confront them with something, they say, well, you said to do things good for God. You said for God. But the word says that if those who you see you can't obey, you won't be able to obey the one that you don't see. If you don't obey the one you see, are you going to obey the one you don't see? Hello? There are many people that want to be angels before God, but they're disgraceful, that don't want to submit to those who they see. Hello? There are people that want to obey this one, but that one they don't. With my mother, whatever she wants, but with my father, no. With my dad, I obey, but my mom, no. That's error. Did I go too fast? Is it good? Are you understanding? Okay, I feel like I went too fast. So what's the problem of Pharisees and scribes? That they didn't want to acknowledge. They were arguing with the master. Can you imagine? These very smart guys were in front of the master, Jesus of Nazareth, and they had this back and forth, contradicting. What did they have to do, those Pharisees, for them to connect? What was the only thing they had to do for everything to manifest in their lives? To acknowledge. That's why the greatest dilemma of human beings is to acknowledge. Everybody wants to be recognized, but nobody wants to recognize. And let me tell you something interesting. Everyone wants to be acknowledged, but nobody wants to acknowledge. Everything you come to learn in this ministry, all the teachings, they're really based in you acknowledging. That's it. Everything you learn here is for that. Because acknowledging is also identifying. How many times did you violate principles, laws, and rules simply because you didn't know? How many of you went through that? But the minute you knew them, did you keep violating principles and rules? No. Why? Because you identified that what you were doing was not correct. So that is why today's topic is connected to acknowledging exalts me. The Pharisees and the scribes never wanted to acknowledge that who was in front of them was the master, the sovereign master. They could not explain to themselves how the son of a carpenter from one of the worst areas of the country, the worst neighborhood, somebody with such wisdom could come out of there and be in front of me who was a doctor or an intellectual. No. Just because of where you're from, I'm not going to accept what you're telling me. Even if it's true. How many have had that happen? Just because you are not from Harvard, or because you're not from this other place, then I'm going to question what you're saying. Human beings will always have that dilemma. They never want to admit, and especially when they know where you come from. That's why there's something interesting. You have to learn to acknowledge through what? The life manual. Where's the life manual? Oh, it should be in your heart. You have it in your hand, but it should be in your heart. Human beings were made to not acknowledge. The minute men sin, automatically they turn into a being that would not acknowledge. Because when human beings sin, they disconnected from God. When someone disconnects from God, they lose all the spiritual sensors. They're blind. They do things through emotions, because of emotions or because they see. That's it. They become material beings, totally material. Everything they know how to do is analyze. If they don't see, do they believe? No. So, see how interesting. Human beings believe seeing. But everything that is seen was made from what was not seen. So, human beings have a contention within them, where they're handling things that were made from what was not seen, but they can interpret it because they don't know what is not seen. They only know what they see. How do I learn to handle what is not seen? In the life manual. Where? In the life manual. So the Pharisees were having a discussion with Jesus because he was talking about spiritual things, and they only know about material things. That's why, for someone to understand what's not seen, the spiritual things, what do you have to do? You have to acknowledge. I told you that human beings was made to not acknowledge. When I say was made, I'm talking about that after the fall of man, automatically they lost their spiritual sensors. That was not God's plan. But that's the plan that man chose to depend on their own. So the greatest battle of every human being is to acknowledge. Why? Because man doesn't acknowledge. I'm going to ask you a question. What is your greatest battle? What is your battle with your children? Your battle with your parents? What is the battle with your husband? The battle with your wife? What's the battle with your boss? What's your battle with society itself? That it doesn't acknowledge. You realize where the dilemma is? My greatest battle is to not acknowledge. My children don't acknowledge. My husband, my wife doesn't acknowledge. Wow. How many have that battle? Everybody has that battle. There's no need to even raise your hands. So, man is blind, living in their own pride. That's why men kill themselves to have knowledge, acknowledgement. For people to know that they have a background of preparation. They prepare and they learn just to know enough for others to acknowledge that. Men fight to be acknowledged. Men kill themselves to accomplish an exaltation, but that exaltation, they're seeking it in the wrong way. That's why man is like the flower of the country that today is and tomorrow is not. Today it's beautiful and precious, but tomorrow it will fade away. It will dry up and die. But that is within us. We all have that battle. Everybody's fighting a titanic, a major battle, socially speaking, because everybody wants to be acknowledged for what they're doing. And that's what's happening with the Pharisees and the scribes. They didn't want to acknowledge that there was another master like them. No. What this one says is weird. And everything that the master was saying was founded in the Bible, in the Word. Everything that he said it, over biblical fundamentals. Nothing was by inspiration. He simply established the prophetic word that had been written in the life manual. But when every human being doesn't care what the life manual says at the end, what they care about is what they understand that should be. Hello? So that's a dilemma that human beings have. They act and move based on what they understand. How do you act? What do you act based on? What you understand. No, because I understand. What do you say? What do you say? I understand. I think. I feel. I believe. How is it that human beings want to move around? No, it's because of what they understand, what they think. So there's a secret in acknowledgement, and it's that people fight to be acknowledged, but they haven't learned to acknowledge. Hello? Write it down. People want to be acknowledged, but the question is, what about you? Are you acknowledging? People want to be acknowledged. But what about me? Am I acknowledging? Because people feel like because they're acknowledged, they will be exalted, and that's not so. People will be exalted when they acknowledge. People believe that because of their acknowledgement, they will be exalted. But you will be exalted by your acknowledgement. And that's where the huge difference is between the way humans operate, right? For example, you can be speaking on a podium, and if you don't acknowledge that if there happens to be a politician in the audience and you don't acknowledge that politician, they will hate you for life. If you're on the podium and somebody well-renowned person comes and you don't acknowledge them, this deputy or whatever, because the world thinks that acknowledgement exalts them. And people take advantage of that. That acknowledgement, it's a reward given in the immediate. But those that are children of God that live under the principles of the kingdom are not seeking to be acknowledged. In the contrary, those that know how to learn how to handle the spiritual world, they live their life to acknowledge. The great wealth that you can have today, the key that you will have for you to accelerate your life in God, is that you learn to admit, to acknowledge, to identify, to accept. I want this ministry to learn that key. At the end, everything that you've been taught is for you to learn to acknowledge. I could never talk to you about this before because I had to teach you first. Now you can identify easily when you do things wrong or when you do it right. Now, do you know where the devil is? How many know where the devil is? It's good. I'm glad that I'm in a church where they know. How do you know where God is? Now, how many of you know where you are? The teachings you're receiving are for you to know where God is, where the devil is, and where you are. Hello? You need to know. The problem is that before you would send the devil, God, and yourself to hell. Before, you thought you were exalting God, but you were actually exalting the devil. Why? Because you didn't acknowledge, you didn't identify. Because acknowledging is connected to the life manual. Without knowledge, you'll never learn how to acknowledge. That's why everyone who disconnects from learning the life manual is a fool that's going to make mistakes. That's normal. When a person commits a mistake, after I hear them, the first thing I ask them is, "Did you take this study?" "No." "Okay, here, take it." I fix it easily. I don't struggle because that's everyone's problem. They've made many mistakes because they don't know. Why? Because they don't know. So they're mixing things all together because in the human aspect, they want to be acknowledged. By the way, there are many people here suffering. Why are you suffering? Because I'm not acknowledged. I'm not acknowledged. Why do women suffer? Because that man doesn't acknowledge me. And it sounds even good and tragic. That animal, he doesn't acknowledge that woman. He doesn't acknowledge what he has. Because the women are always so good. Such a good woman. Such a good woman. And I want to tell you something interesting. In the midst of all the conflicts, at the end of the day, what you've always realized is that none of the two want to acknowledge. If one of the two, as business partners, if one person in any relationship if one of the two is not willing to acknowledge, they're not going to be able to accomplish anything. Somebody needs to acknowledge. Furthermore, those that learn to acknowledge have to allow those that don't want to acknowledge, leave them alone. Hello? What do you need to do with those that don't acknowledge? Let them be. The ones that don't acknowledge are like the mules. They don't understand. They're stubborn. Stubborn person doesn't understand. What do you do with a stubborn person? You leave them alone. Let them be. They don't want to acknowledge what you're doing. Don't stop doing what you need to do. Don't stop fulfilling your responsibility. Because many times, based on, they don't acknowledge, but what did you do? Are you acknowledging? Well, I started, but since he didn't acknowledge, I stopped. So what are we left with? Two stubborn people. Understand, every human being is going to have conflicts in every areas of their lives. At home, their children, their spouse, in school, at work. Everyone's going to have conflicts. And conflicts will prosper, meaning they will be a constant, is if someone doesn't want to acknowledge. The great dilemma in a marriage is that I don't acknowledge and you don't acknowledge. But the problem is that everyone wants to be acknowledged. What's been your greatest battle? He doesn't acknowledge. He doesn't acknowledge what I do for him. Ugh. I love that because it makes me want to cry. wow, how abusive is that guy? But if you call the guy, he says, she doesn't acknowledge. He doesn't acknowledge. But come on. Can someone explain to me what's happening? Because if I go to one side, they're crying because the other one doesn't acknowledge. And if I go to the other one, it's the same thing. And then the pastor is left crying with two stubborn people. All the battles have to do with that. But I've learned under the principles of the kingdom that someone needs to acknowledge. And that's a battle. To accomplish one, to acknowledge. I've never wanted both of them to acknowledge. It's very hard. It's very hard to accomplish that. You always have to start with one. When I'm dealing with a couple, I always try to identify who's gonna break the fastest, because at least they give me a signal that they want to change. So I work with them. Because if someone doesn't want to acknowledge, then that's a problem. Imagine, in order for us to connect to everything that is of God, we have to allow God to guide us there. There are many that say, I know how to get to the purpose. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. Okay, go ahead. Remember that. Teaching doesn't come without the experience. In order to teach, you need to have a trajectory, experience. Because our human nature, there's always an impulse to do things the way you want. And there's that concupiscence. So you need to have the experience in order to submit that. Because somebody always wants to be acknowledged, but they don't want to acknowledge. So that will always be the greatest dilemma. Human beings want acknowledgement. By nature, they understand that when they're acknowledged, then they acquire a greater background, a greater exaltation, human exaltation, material exaltation. Human beings don't want to accept to be that humbling themselves is that they will be exalted. Don't let that person humiliate you. Don't let that woman humiliate you. Don't let that man humiliate you. How many used to say that? They say, if you come under, they're going to take advantage of you. Let me ask you a question. Who is it that should take advantage of you? Somebody from the street or your spouse? Your spouse? Your spouse? There's nothing more interesting about acknowledging than to acknowledge who we are. We're here talking, I'm here talking in front of an audience, but we all have an ending. Our ending will come. As human beings, as people here on earth, we have an expiration date. We come here to earth, but we have an ending. You have to understand that our weak aspect is interesting because that is what allows me to depend. My limitation makes me depend. That's why I've always said that is such the potential. Even your weaknesses and your strengths are good. When you can acknowledge your strengths and your weakness, listen, you will be able to administer your life. But when you think you're strong in everything, that you're good at everything, you have an issue. Or when you think you're bad at everything, you have a problem. To acknowledge the strength and the weaknesses in a person is correct, it's good. It's good to know your strong points and weak points. I'm not good at this, I'm weak here, I'm strong here. Or with your spouse, to know the parts that you have to work on. Nobody can do it alone. Nobody. Jesus himself showed us that everything is done as a team. So, to acknowledge is the key that you will have to use daily. Write it down and underline it and use a red marking on it. You want to see how I can fix your issue right away? Let's say you're having an argument and everybody's going back and forth, and I come there and I say, okay, what's the issue? You listen to the person. And then I say, they're right. He's right. He's right. He's correct. That's it. All he wanted was to hear that he was right. And then everything calms down. The minute you give somebody the acknowledge that they're right, they calm down. You see, do you realize that it's a key that you need to use every day? You see somebody who's upset and they're like, rah, rah, and you say, you're right, you're right. They deflate. They're disarmed because they just want to be acknowledged. The spirits just want you to add fuel to fire, but when you say you're right, they're disarmed. Man, the spirits are like, wait, what? They don't expect it. And when they put their guard down, then I handle them. It's a key. That's why I've always told women to handle themselves wisely, to handle their husbands wisely. Instead of screaming, no. If the woman is wise, okay, my love, okay, take it easy. They calm down. They come down. If you lose the wisdom and you start shouting and you start, no, you're not going to get anywhere. And women need to be wise. Because men are strong, and I'm not saying that they need to be animals in their handling, because that is not right. But I'm saying they have a natural impulse. They're like brutes. So then who's the wisdom of the house? The woman. The woman. They're the ones that say, animal, I mean, my love, take it easy. No, take it easy. Take it easy. Listen, women are our weaknesses. I've told you before that you can make your man eat from your hand, but you don't want to acknowledge. You don't want to know who you are. Write it down and underline it. To acknowledge is to admit. What I'm trying to say is that human beings, in their lifestyle, they're not prepared to acknowledge. They always are seeking to be acknowledged. That is the nature. Human beings are always trying to protect themselves from everyone. From the minute they wake up, looking over their shoulders constantly, being defensive. Stop with the show. Stop with the show. Stop living like human beings that are common. People that don't know how to handle the natural world or the spiritual world. You behave like immature people with the back and forth. No, because you did this, because you did that, because you did this, because you did that. No. I've said here before, men and women, they like to be going at it, poking each other and messing with each other. How many men here enjoy that? Enjoy messing with their wives so they get upset? Every man likes that. We like to get them upset. We like to get them upset. Human beings don't want to admit by nature. They don't want to acknowledge. And that has been one of the greatest wealth, or the keys that will bring you the most wealth in your life. Jesus didn't come to be acknowledged. He came to acknowledge. He came to establish the truth. He didn't come to prove he was the big kahuna. No, he came to say, I'm the way. Was that a lie? No, it wasn't a lie. Was he asking to be acknowledged? No, he was the truth. He didn't lie. What he was doing was centralizing all the different ideologies, religions, for them to be concentrated through the only way, the only truth, and the only life. That's why it's valuable that you understand that acknowledging doesn't violate principles. Hello? Hello? No one who's acknowledging needs to violate the principles. Everything that you do has to do with acknowledging. Hello? Why are you sitting down listening? Well, some of them came because they were seeking God. Those are the religious ones. But you're sitting there because you acknowledge the prophetic dial. Why do you sow? Because you know that you reap what you sow. So that's faith. Faith is acknowledging. Everything that you do is acknowledged. Why do you marry? Number one, because you acknowledge that you need someone. Number two, because you acknowledge that you love someone. Somebody here said because they needed someone to iron. And it's true. Someone here said that they got married because they acknowledged that this person was the one for them. But then when she got home, she realized that she got tricked. Yes. Listen, we win women over. It's not women that win men over. It's the men that win women over. But even though the woman is won over by the men, at the end of the day, who ends up dominating is the woman. But it cannot be violating the principles. And what is it that happens in the couples and families? That many principles are being violated. Everybody wants to do what I say. And I sit with my family and I tell them, I don't want you to do what I say. is for us to do what the principles say. I don't try to impose what I want. I try for what the principles are telling us to do, it's done. And to teach them that I'm also submitting to that. Because what did God say about the Pharisees? Do what they say, but not what they do. Hello? Here I say a lot of things. Do what I'm telling you because that's what the life manual says. But if my lifestyle doesn't support that, don't do that. I'm saying, is it biblical? Yes, do that. But if my conduct of life doesn't align with what I'm saying, then don't do it. And that's what we need to have clear. We don't need to, nobody needs to do what you say. So families need to understand that we need to do what the principles say. Remember that the iniquity in man doesn't want to submit to the word. There are people that pretend to be crazy. And it's not some people, all of us want to act like fools. I do this and I do that. And this I'm going to pretend like I don't understand. But it's a lie. That's part of the rebellion that you carry. That's trickery. People understand. Everybody understands. The thing is that there's a trickery where you act like a fool. And I love the fools here. I love them. Because I'm gonna run them down. I'm gonna run them down. You know why you're gonna get run down? Because you wanna act like a fool, and you're not a fool. And you wanna act like others are a fool, and they're not fools. So we have to learn to acknowledge. You have to acknowledge your parents, acknowledge your family, the people that are doing good for you. There are men that don't acknowledge the wives they have. But if you take them away for 2 days, they'll be like, oh my gosh. Everything goes out of control because many of us are worse than newborn babies. That even we need to get someone to help us put our underwear on. Yeah. And I'm not embarrassed to say I'm one of them. I'm worse than Joshua, my son. And I say it with pride. That's how I am. Oh, give me medicine, but no, put it in my mouth. Put it in my mouth. Okay, rub my head. That's me. That's me at home. Let's talk about 3 points that have to do with acknowledging. Number 1, it's a gesture of humility. It's acknowledging what I am. And what am I? Number 1, a fragile creature, made from dirt and destined to dirt. When I speak about these things, acknowledging what I am, I'm not taking away. In the contrary, it's adding to me. That is where the problem in men, in human beings are, when they don't acknowledge what they are. Put things where they are. Put things in their place. That's why women need to know what they are. That's why Proverbs 30 speaks clearly about what a woman is. That's a woman. The virtuous woman. That's a woman. If you want to know what a woman is, go there. If you're not like that, then you're not a woman. You're part of a woman. Number 2. But I'm also made in God's image and destined for Him. Yes, I'm fragile because I'm in the world, yes, but I'm also a person that is made in God's image. And through that, the attributes of power are going to flow also. And even more so those that connect to the Spirit and are God's children. So that you need to know how to identify and put things in their place. We've discussed here that women are like raiders. They're intelligent. They're wise. They can take care of men, take care of the children, work. They have lots of impressive virtues. They have a huge potential. And men are the brute strength, the ones that fight, the ones that keep the house. They sustain everything. Like, Beauty and the Beast. He's the one bringing the beauty in the carriage. That animal is the head, and we have to submit to him. But to submit to his being conceited, no. Remember that submission has to do with what we've agreed upon. In the school of ministry, we talked about submission, which has to do with what we've agreed upon. Everything that you and your partner have agreed upon, that's what you should focus on. Whoever violates that, then it's rebellious, and that's where the enemy comes in. If you want to see why you're not doing well, it's because you're rebellious. You are violating something. There's no way for the enemy to mess or dominate your life unless you allow him to. So if you're doing badly, it's because you're allowing the devil to come in. Nobody should be doing poorly. You were made to do poorly. You were made extremely well. Everything that is evil in your environment, start identifying where it comes from, because nothing is by chance. Everything has a reason. So we need to be clear in your agreements. And we also said, how many times has your partner told you, hey, let's do this, let's do that, and you're like, yeah. And then you forget. There it is. You got in agreement, and then you didn't do it. I'm not going to do anything. So people handle themselves like that, doing whatever they want, and they also want to do well in everything. So now you understand why you're not doing well? It's your fault because of your trickery, because you act like a fool and you're not a fool. Because you want to act like God's children. You want to act like you're children of God, but at the end you're doing things like crazy, out of control, because you don't want to acknowledge. Rebellion is so satanic. A satanic person is not one who conjures the devil. A satanic person is the one who lives outside of the principles. And there are many satanic people here, sitting here, pretending to be good and saying, oh, Lord, I love you. No, that's a lie. You're a trickster. You want me to believe your act. You're pretending. If God is in you, then it will manifest, and I don't see it in you. When God is in you, you're splendid, and I don't see any splendid in you. Show me the fruit. Show me what you have, because I don't see anything. When somebody says God dwells in them, they have to show me through the fruit. And I don't see it. I don't see manifestation. You're dry. So acknowledging has to do with a gesture of humility. In humility, people declare who they are. They know who they are. They know how to handle themselves. They never move out of who they are. It's not to pretend, it's to be, but everybody wants to pretend. I'm going to pretend I know a lot, they don't know anything. They don't know anything. So get down from your horse, and just learn. Place yourself. Place yourself where you go. That's it. Because you bring these influences from the world, acting like you're all that. No. Here you come, like a fragile person, normal, a human beings, acknowledging that they make so many mistakes because they didn't know how to do things, just like the rest of us. We've humbled ourselves to hear the life manual, because the life manual is the one that's going to teach me how to handle my life. Find your place. Or you want to continue like before? What my mom taught me. My mom taught me that you light a candle, and after you light the candle, then you spin twice, and the spirits dissipate. We all come from that. From what mom taught me and my grandpa. And I heard one time, in the country they used to say about dead people, that they used to come out at 12 p.m. They used to say that in the country. They always had something. I don't care about those stories. Don't give me your stories. I don't care about your stories or your testimonies. I care about the principles that you know how to handle. You know how much it's cost me to take all that junk out of your head, all that trash in your head. Faith increases when you listen to the truth of God, when you live the truth of God, when you establish the truth of God, and the principles are established. That is kingdom. Faith comes from hearing the word, not from hearing testimonies. So people here come to that to learn how to live by faith. That's how you live by faith. That's how you live by faith. Oh, I thought it was listening to the testimonies. Oh, okay. I don't care. And God doesn't care about that. A miracle, no. God must be so embarrassed and sad seeing people that are always admiring and so excited because he made a miracle. Like, wow, God finally did it. He made a miracle. People, God did something. Come. And everybody's chasing after the one who's talking about miracles. So acknowledging is a gesture of humility. Humility is obedience. This is not by chance. Humility is not an appearance. God wants you to know, to acknowledge, so that the one that is in you can flow. There's always a way out. There's always escape. But you are so stubborn that you're always stuck because you don't acknowledge. There's always a way out. When the situation is stuck in any aspect, spiritual, economical, I just get quiet, listening to the Spirit. What is it? Quiet, just waiting. I'm talking to everybody, but I'm quiet inside because I know I'm going to acknowledge which way I need to go. I'm here with everybody, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting because I know that I'm gonna be able to identify which way He's saying. I'm gonna recognize which way to go because there's a level of acknowledging that doesn't only have to do with asking someone for forgiveness. Of course, as a child of God, you know that. But it's sad that I still hear some of you saying, yeah, I have to talk to my wife, let her know that I appreciate what she does. Or yeah, I have to talk to my mother. It's sad that you're still dealing with those levels. It's sad because you're behaving like a bastard when you should behave like a child of God. Children of God know how to handle themselves in the context. When I'm talking about acknowledgement, I'm talking about identifying the way to take. Where do I have to stop? What do I have to work on? When do I have to speak? When do I have to move forward? All that. This is the way. You have to know. People, if He's the one that's supposed to guide me to the truth, does that mean that I know the truth or that He's the one that knows the truth? It's Him, but I need to be able to acknowledge. But you live like a crazy person doing whatever you want? My goodness. I admire you with all the things that you do. I don't have anything that I need to do in my head. I have no information in my head. You know why? Because my mind, I only occupy for Him to speak. My mind needs to be clean, in silence, quiet, at peace. You need to pass the stage of the noise in your head, the blockage. That's the immaturity stage. Those are the children. So if they do it, I accept it. Because that's okay. It's somebody that's still growing, mature. That's fine. But you, who's mature already, when you do that, I don't accept it. So when you have a gesture of humility, the Holy Spirit is not going to have any difficulty in telling you things, speaking to you. Many don't hear because he speaks and you don't hear. A mule is easy to talk to than you. And he talks, listen, my child, do this, but they don't understand. Because sometimes we have our politic of life so defined that we don't hear anyone. So do whatever you want. I'm one of the ones that allows people to do whatever they want. And when the consequence blows up, then I'll be here. I'll be here. But if you don't want to hear the voice of the Spirit, because at the end of the day, you don't have to hear me. You don't have to listen to me. It's the voice of the Spirit, not me. Who do you need to listen to? Me or the Spirit? The voice of the Spirit. Who's the only one that's never going to contradict the Word? Never. The Holy Spirit is never going to say something out of the Word. He's never going to violate the principles. Never. So you need to have that gesture of humility always. He wants to speak. The thing is that you got so much in your head that coming to church is where God was going to speak to you. You come here, not for God to talk to you. You come here to connect to the prophetic dial because here is your greatest work. The work where you're told it's the Great Commission. This ministry is for you to be formed because you have a job to do. And what's that job? To go. Because where are you? Apostolic, which means sent. You come here because you're sent. And those that are sent needs to be discipled. And you're being discipled, taught, prepared, armed. We're giving you arms, weapons, grenades, knives, everything that you need. Because you can't send somebody that hasn't been prepared. Oh, because I've been in church 20 years. So? Do you want to come explain to us those 20 years in your church? How many want to hear? Because the prophetic dial has changed. I want to learn. I want to know. So, You need to have gesture of humility, acknowledging who you are. Number two, hope is founded in the truth of the one who created us limited with unlimited goodness. The Lord has unlimited love for my limitation. Why does God love my limitation? And you say, what do you mean? When a person tells me, I'm weak, I can't, there's no way out, I have too many problems, I get happy. And I say, great, finally I did it. Thank you, Father. Because when you feel limited, then the unlimited goodness of God wants to manifest in you. Because every time you try to pretend who you were and that you had what it took, then the unlimited goodness of God couldn't manifest. Your limitation is what's going to make you depend on the Spirit. Your limitation is so good. And thanks to your limitation, you now have to depend on God. What happens is for the world to hear something like that is disgraceful. But for God's children, it's a wealth. Because my limitation is what made me strong. My limitation is what made me great, powerful, because that was the only way how everything that was of His manifested in my life. So you see how we're fusing things together? Things that you wanted to hide, you didn't want to acknowledge your limitations. No, I'm all that, I'm all this, I'm all that. Wow, I got this. That's it. An eye for an eye. That's it. God loves your limitations. He loves your limitation. Because your limitation, in your limitation is that He's going to manifest all His power that's unlimited. Now, your limitation makes you depend on the Spirit. You depend on Him. Thank God for your limitation. Because if things don't get stuck, you don't seek God. You don't connect. And you don't seek the right way. So it's so good that your game got blocked, that your road got blocked. That brings me joy. Every time somebody tells me, oh, I need help, I get happy. That's great, finally. Come. Because God works with people that are limited. Hello? God works with people that are limited. If you're a superhero, you never heard of Batman and Robin in the Bible? That's cartoons. Get that out of your head. In the Bible, there are no superheroes. The only word that I believe, the only one, I don't believe any other book. The only book I believe is the Word of God. Every story has truth and lie, but no story is well told. None. The only story that I know and I acknowledge is the one of the Life Manual. Because it's the only story where your limitations are not hidden. David, the king that killed Goliath, but a woman made him shake, and he killed her husband. And the devil completely messed up his life. His daughter got violated, his son got killed, and then the other son rebelled against him. Wow. And today, we're still connected to promises that God gave David, that his people are going to receive it today. That was David, the superhero, that had the heart according to God's heart. That's why I don't believe in any book, but except the Life Manual. I can enjoy a book here and there, but I only believe in the Life Manual. I entertain myself with those other books, but I believe in the Life Manual. So those that acknowledge, activate all those things. They're the ones that know there's a hope. They're the ones that know and believe in the one that has unlimited plans for their lives. They acknowledge, they're not afraid anymore. Those that acknowledge don't have trophies and titles in high esteem, because they know that there's one that's going to lift them up in the midst of the little that you have. It doesn't matter. Acknowledging is a knowledge, is knowing who you serve. Who do you serve? Your name? Your company? Your family? Your ego? Your pride? No. I serve the Father. And these are the ways in which the Father can manifest all of His in your life. In you being able to learn how to live with a hope of the one that has given you His unlimited goodness. That you have to learn that your limitations is where He's going to give you His unlimited goodness in your favor, and that He will raise us in the midst of the little that we have, no matter what that is. It doesn't matter what bondage, what jail you're in, but wherever you are, I want to tell you that no matter how small you are, His love is going to manifest in you, and everyone will have to see it. You don't understand that when God takes something small and He raises it up, He's the one that takes the glory. He's the one that takes the glory. How many people bet on your destruction? How many churches prayed for your life to be a disgrace? There are families that are waiting for you to be screwed, for them to say, I told you so, I knew it. You see? Because they didn't listen. But it's the opposite. You're going to say, when things go the way they need to, you're going to say, this happened because you didn't acknowledge. But you have a greater demand because you're risking it all. You left behind many things, religion, many shows, glory, fame. You left behind being leaders in different things. We're all the same here, all of us. And I like to work with people that are small in spirit, those that know the truth. That's why we're not afraid to say publicly, I learned. When we say I learned, what we're doing is acknowledging, which is what we were never taught. Because nobody ever wanted to say publicly, I learned. That's what we used to say. Oh, this ministered to me. God spoke to me through this word. Stop with the show. When you say, I learned, it's because we didn't know. And it's okay for us to say, I didn't know, I learned. So you're disgracing yourself. You're acknowledging all your trophies, your renowns fall to the ground. And others can see and say, wow, I didn't know that person didn't know. I learned that I was rebellious.